There's a new boy at the pool today. I told my parents that long ago night, after the incident with Xander and I were swimming. I was careful to leave out any mention of Xander losing his tablet container. I didn't want him to get in trouble. The omission felt like the table itself stuck in my throat. Every time I swallowed, I felt it catch there, threatening to choke me. But still, I didn't tell. My parents exchanged glances. A new boy? Are you sure? My father asked. I'm sure, I said. His name is Kai Markingham. Xander and I swam with him. He's staying with the Markinghams then, my father said. They've adopted him, I told my parents. He calls Idea his mother and Patrick his father. I heard him. My parents exchanged glances. Adoption were and are virtually unheard in our province of Oria. We heard a knock on the door. Stay here, Cassia, my father said. Let us see who it is. I waited back in the kitchen, but I heard Xander's father, Mr. Cowher, at the door, and his deep loud voice booming through the foyer. We aren't allowed to go into one another's residence, but I could imagine him standing there on the steps looking like the older version of Xander. Some blonde hair, the same laughing blue eyes. I talked with Patrick and Ari Markingham, he said. I thought you wanted to know the boy is an orphan. He's from the outer provinces. He is. My mother's voice held the note of concern. The outer provinces are the geographic fringe of the society, where life is harder and wilder. Sometimes people refer to them as the lesser provinces, or the backward province, because they have so little order and knowledge there. There's a higher consideration of aberrations there than in the general population. And even abnormals, some say. Though no one knows for certain where the abnormals are, they used to be kept in the safe house, but many of those stand empty these days. He's here with full society approval, Mr. Cowher said. Patrick showed me the paperwork himself. He told me to tell anyone else who might be concerned. I knew you'd be worried, Molly, and you too, Abram. Well then, my mother said, it sounds all right. I edged around the corner to look into the foyer, where my parents' backs were to me and Xander's father stood on the steps with the night behind him. Then Xander's father dropped his voice, and I had to listen closely to hear what he said over the low hum of the point in the foyer. Molly, you should have seen Adria and Patrick. They seemed alive again. And the boy is Adria's nephew, her sister's son. My mother's hand went up to her hair and gestured she always made when she was uncomfortable, because we all remembered vividly what happened to the Markinghams. In the rare case of government failure, a Class 1 abnormally should have been unidentified, let alone allowed to roam the streets to seek into the government's offices, where Patrick worked and where his son was visiting him for the day. We all kept quiet about it, but we all knew, because the Markingham boy was gone. murdered while he waited for his father to come back from the meeting elsewhere in the building. Because Patrick Markingham himself had to spend time being held since the abnormally waited in the office quite quiet and attacked Patrick too. Her nephew, my mother said, her voice filled with empathy. Of course Adria would want to raise him, and the government might feel like they owe it to Patrick to make the exception for him, the father said. Aberan, my mother said reproachfully, but Xander's father agreed. It's logical, an exception as recompense for the accident. A son to replace the one they shouldn't have had to lose. That's how the officials see it. Later, my mother came into my room to tuck me in, with her voice soft, like the blankets she sheltered me around. She asked, "Did you hear us talking?" "Yes," I said. "The Markingham's nephew's son starts school tomorrow." "Kai," I said. "That's his name." "Yes," she said. She bent down. Her long blonde hair swung over her shoulders. Her freckles looked like stars scattered across her skin. She smiled at me. "You'll be nice to him, won't you?" she asked. I helped him and help him fit in. It might be hard for a new to be new when everyone else belongs. I will, I promise. As it turned out, her advice was unnecessary. The next day at school, Kai said hello and introduced himself to everyone. Quiet and quick, he moved through the halls. He told everyone who he was, so no one had to ask. When the bell rang, he disappeared into the groups of students. It was shocking how quickly he vanished. He was there 1 minute, separate and distinct and new, and then he became part of the crowd, as though he had done it all his life, as if he had never lived anywhere but here. And that is how it always has been with Kai. I realize now. Looking back, he had always seen him swimming along the surface. Only on the first day did we see him dive deep. "I have something to tell you," I said to Grandfather, as I pulled a chair next to him. The officials didn't keep me too long at the game center after I stepped on the tablets. I still have enough time to visit. I'm grateful because it is the second to last time I will visit him, and the thought makes me feel hollow. "Ah," Grandfather said. "Something good?" He sits by the window, and as he often does at night. He watches the sun, and out of the world he stares into something. I wonder if he watches the sun come up again. It is hard to sleep when you know you are almost at the end. Do you not want to miss a moment, even those that would otherwise seem dull and unremarkable? In the night, the colors wash away, gray and black take over, and now the bright pinprick of the light flashes as the street lamp lights up. An air train truck dull in the daylight. It looks like a beautiful glowing path above the ground now that their evening lights have been turned on. As I watch, an air train rushes past, carrying people along in its white and light in space. "Something strange," I say to Grandfather, puts down his fork, and he is eating pieces of something called pie, which I never actually tasted, but it looks delicious. I wish it weren't against the rules for him to share food with me. Everything's fine. I'm still matched to Xander, I say. I've learned from the society that it is the way to give news. Reassurance first, all else after. But there was an error with my microcard. When I went to view Xander's face vanished, and I saw someone else. You saw someone else? I nod, trying not to look too hard at the food on his dish. The flakiness and surgent crust, which reminds me of the crystals on the edge of snow. The red stained berries smeared across the plate, ripe and surely full of taste. The words I've said cling in my mind like a pastry does to the heavy silver fork. I saw someone else. What did you feel? What did you say to the other boy's face come up on the screen? Grandfather asked kindly, putting his hand on mine. Were you worried? A little, I say. I was confused because I didn't know, because I knew the second boy too. Grandfather's eyebrows curved in surprise. You do? It's Kai Mikingham. I tell him. Patrick and Abria's son, who lives in Maple Tree, brought down the street from me. What explanation did the officials give you for this mistake? It was a mistake by the society, I say. The society doesn't make mistakes. Of course not, Grandfather says, his tone measured and even. People do, though. That's what the officials think must have happened. She thinks someone must have altered the microcard and put Kai's face on there. Why? My grandfather wonders. She thinks it was some kind of cruel joke because I lower my voice even farther. Of Kai's status, he's an aberration. Grandfather pushes out his chair, knocking his tray to the ground. I'm surprised to see how thin he's grown, but stands straight as a tree. There was a picture of an aberration as your match?